Well, good morning, and welcome back to day 32 of our summer pilgrimage together here at the Institute for Priestly Formation. As we continue in our summer programs, we have three groups that are with us on campus this week. We have the 30-day retreat, and the 9 priests and 9 seminarians, the 18 participants in the 30-day retreat, have their second full day of orientation today. And what we'll do is we'll introduce them to a key aspect of the 30-day retreat, and then spend most of our time talking about the natural ebb and flow of consolation and desolation in the life of prayer. The priests who work at seminaries, who are spiritual directors, they're going to learn a little bit more about the role of supervision in their life and the importance of having a mentor walk with us, especially as we have the privilege of listening to another person's interior life. Supervision in the life of a spiritual director is really important. And then finally, the seminarians in their morning class will continue to learn more about celibacy and sexuality. And today's lecture will specifically help the men learn more about the church's teaching on affective maturity, the maturing of one's interior life, the adhering of everything in one's interior life, including our sexuality. And much of the conversation this morning will be on issues such as same-sex attraction or homosexuality and things like that. Certainly the seminarians are going to bring the gospel and the light of the truth of Jesus Christ into a culture that is as much influenced by popular opinion or the response to emotional movements as it is anything else. Our culture very much influenced by what we would call a postmodern philosophy. What is that? That's a way of thinking that sounds something like this. Whatever's true to me is true to me, and whatever's true to you is true to you. Perhaps you've heard that. Perhaps you've thought that. That truth is really up to you, and whatever you believe to be true is okay with you, and if somebody else believes something else to be true, that's okay to them. And in a postmodern philosophy, truth is relative. It's not necessarily universal. It's really up to you to determine what's true to you. And that has profound implications, and that has profound danger in our spiritual life. We believe in one Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and we believe in a cohesive articulation of his teaching about salvation and about the way that we are not only to live with him, but to live here in the world with him. So for us to be so influenced by a culture that believes that it's up to you to believe whatever you want to believe is something that the seminarians, as future priests, are going to want to very pastorally, as good shepherds, enter into, bring the light of the truth so that people can live in freedom. And certainly in today's culture, a few things probably get as much attention when it comes to morality as civil unions. Can a man and a woman be married only, or is it lawful, legal, and perhaps even moral for those of the same sex to be married? The church has a very clear and concise teaching in regards to the dignity of marriage and the role of sexuality, and yet our seminarians are going to be really bringing the gospel of truth into a culture that continues to far further away from the truth as guided by Christ. It's really a question for the seminarians to not only look in their own lives as far as where are they in their maturity interiorly with their own integration of their whole being, but if you were at IPF today, we have the same conversation with you in regards to the church's teaching around same-sex attraction or sexuality and marriage, and I think that for a lot of us lay people in the pew, those walking together, I think it's a question of influence. Who has influence over your mind? Who has influence over your opinions, over what you believe to be true. Jesus Christ, the fullness of the Father's glory, the full revelation of who God is, Jesus Christ, came to preach the gospel and to preach a gospel of freedom, light, and truth. That gospel is meant to shape our lives. That gospel is meant to shape and to influence the culture. And yet, I often just wonder with you together, who's influencing who? Or who's conforming to who? Like here's the example. The example is, you have a parent and a child doesn't have the same lens of wisdom that the parent does. The child just wants what it wants immediately, and the child hasn't lived as much as the parent has, and the child looks at life's issues very differently than the parent does. And when the child wants something, it wants something, and sometimes the parent gives the child what it wants, and sometimes the parent, for lots of different reasons, says no. Let's say you have a child in the grocery store who wants a sugar-filled cereal, and the parent says no, and the child pouts and throws a big temper tantrum. There's a certain wisdom and order in parenting where the parent orders and influences the child. I think unfortunately a lot of us have probably witnessed when it seems like the child is influencing the parent. I think a lot of us have seen it when the child is really kind of in control of the house. And then you would ask the question naturally, like who's conforming to who? Like we can see that in the natural world. We can see that in the relationship between a parent and a child. And yet in our spiritual lives, like I think the same analogy holds, but I think that it can kind of almost like slip through our hands sometimes. Who's conforming to who? Is our culture conforming to the gospel, or are the minds of Catholics, or the minds of Christians conforming to the whim of the secular world? So when it comes to homosexuality, to same-sex attraction, who has more influence over your mind and your opinion? The gospel? Jesus? The church? Or our nation, our culture, our Supreme Court? Most recent decisions about what's quote-unquote legal. Like, who influences you? I think a lot of times it's easy for us to not fully understand the ancient depth of church teaching. We kind of glaze over what we think the church teaches, and then we are so influenced in so many other ways by the culture that it's easy for us and have our opinions influenced by the world. Like today, we're going to go right there with the seminarians in their hearts. And if you were at IPF today, we would do the same thing to you and with you and aside you. Who influences you? Who influences the way that you look at Jesus? Who influences your understanding, reverence, and adherence to the church? When it comes to life and truth, who has more influence over you? God or our world? God bless you.